When the thinking mind is quiet for just a brief time, that's when we feel joy. Think of one moment in your life when you felt deeply peaceful. Zoom all the way in to that very short period of time where you really felt that peace. And the only question that you need to ask yourself is, during that tiny moment in my life, how much thinking was I doing? And the answer for most people is none. If it's the thinking mind that's causing most of my problems in my life, then I just need to learn how to stop that. And most people assume that they can just stop their minds. Unfortunately, we can't stop our minds by trying hard to stop our minds. Nothing around mindfulness is ever about beating your mind into submission. It's about working with, not against.
The idea of job security is outdated as a landline. If you haven't been in a search for a while, it's probable you will at some point, by choice or not. Most executives admit to staying way too long or sense what's coming and justify staying anyway. Here, there's another reason. The faulty belief that navigating to what's next will inevitably be worse and has to suck. Screw that. Lauren Greif has spent a lifetime in corporate and executive search, calling bullshit on stale career advice that most still use. This is Career Blast in a Half, the career podcast for executives ready to cut past outdated career advice to fuel your outcomes now. So let's go.
I don't know about your thoughts on mindfulness, but our guest today is talking about how mindfulness in your career is BS. Steve Ware is a mindfulness expert, like the real kind. And what he's going to share with us is not only worth being mindful around, but this episode is specifically designed for those who are in their job search and want to be more productive, clearer in their thinking, and also drive without burnout. So those two things do not need to go together. You do not need to grind or drive so hard that by the time you get to the interviews, you're like sawdust. That would suck. And that's also one of the things that I see all the time. People burn out from over applying. And so we have an amazing guest today. And I have been following Steve's content for years, like literally, and he makes me laugh and he's goofy, and no better person to talk about something so serious than somebody who has a great sense of humor. So welcome, Steve.
Thank you so much for having me, Lauren. I'm really happy to be here.
Awesome. So I want you to walk us back because, like I said, you're kind of like a cheeky, goofy guy, right? And you're also a guy that, like, how many years did you spend at IBM? I mean, IBM to me is like the suit of all suits. So bring us through how this happened to you, this cheeky cynic, and how it is that you stumbled across mindfulness.
Okay. So I'll give you a slightly abridged version because it's a long story spanning a lot of years. But yeah, I joined IBM when I was a kid, Lauren. I was literally like 18 back in 1992. So I joined straight from what we call A-levels in England, which is the second lot of exams you do before you go to university. And I joined IBM and it was good. It was great. A lot of great fun times. And the kind of relevant bit, I guess, happened probably, it's probably about 13 years ago now. So after I've been at IBM for a good 20 years, long time. And I started burning out.
And what did that look like? Like describe for us what burnout looks like, feels like, smells like, because here's the thing. We use that in such a vernacular way. Oh, I'm so burned out.
Yeah.
That there's like a spectrum, right? And so for you, what was that experience? Yeah,
I'm glad you asked that because people misuse a lot of words, right? People are a bit sad and they say they're depressed. People have a cold and they say they got the flu. And then only when you really experience the real deal, the flu, then you stop misusing the word flu when you're just kind of a little bit under the weather. And Same for me in burnout. So burnout isn't to me, it's not having a tough week or a tough couple of weeks or feeling a bit tired, or it's being so anxious you don't really know what to do with yourself. It's having no way of switching your mind off. It's going from sleeping like a baby to dreading getting into your bed, because you know your mind's just going to race and you're going to be anxious and there's nothing you can do about it, and it's like torture. So even some of the things that you used to love doing become painful and hard. So to me, it was very high anxiety. I was on a constant state of alert. That gets you down after a bit. I wouldn't say I was clinically depressed, but I was certainly low, because I think anyone who's experienced anxiety for a prolonged period of time, it drags you down, and the sleep deprivation drags you down. So it lowers your mood too. And you're not yourself. You're kind of snapping at people. You don't find things funny anymore. It's not a nice spot to be in.
Is this on the rise or is it on the decline? Are people like, with all the meditation apps, all the stuff that we have that it seemingly is at our fingertips, is burnout more kind of prevalent? Is it happening at earlier stages? Like, tell us from like your perspective, somebody that really, really understands this epidemic, what is happening?
I mean, I think we can trace some of it back to the impact of the digital revolution. Mm-hmm. So I'm old enough to remember. I remember being in an IBM office once, and a guy burst in. Must have been, I forget the exact date, but mid 90s. And he said, "Guys, there's this thing called the internet." And everyone was like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "Oh, it was in its infancy then, and it's connected, and you'd be able to do this and be able to do that." And we're like, "Get out of here! That's not going to be used by anybody, whatever." Blah. And we had a big library downstairs, and in the ground floor of IBM, there's this huge library when you go and look things up and you do it old school. And that, for me, was the start of this incredible digital revolution, which has been so amazing. We've all got our cell phones, our smartphones that can do anything and everything and guide us wherever we want to go on the planet, and we can take calls, we can do emails, and we can communicate with people all over the place. But that kind of comes at a cost, because ultimately we've still got pretty much a Stone Age mind. Our brains and bodies haven't developed at the same pace our technology has, and yet we're now inundated. So we're bombarded. You can find these stats, like you can find whatever stats you want on the internet, but I think everyone would agree, most people would agree that we're doing more thinking as a species than we ever have before. And this is going to be the crux of probably what we're going to talk about today. So the problem for most people is an excessive amount of thinking. And fundamentally, the biggest problem for people is that they have a mind that uses them rather than something that they use. So the mind isn't a tool, isn't a helpful, brilliant tool that they can pick up and use and then kind of put down. It becomes the master. It thinks when it wants to think. If it wants to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning, keep you awake the whole night, it just does it. And so we kind of get swept away by this this kind of noise-making machine in our head, which is a phenomenal and brilliant tool. But if it's jammed in the on position and it's constantly stimulating us, and just, even if it's not anything particular, if it's just kind of repetitive, useless thinking, which, by the way, they think up to 90% of most people's thinking is these days. I mean, anyone listening to this, watching this, check it, just kind of see what's true for you. So they reckon most people think between 60 to 80,000 thoughts a day, I think it is. So, work out what that is an hour based on how many hours you sleep every night. It can be X thousand thoughts an hour, right? But the real kicker here is that most of those thoughts, up to 9 out of 10 of them, is for a lot of repetition, and a lot of it's useless. We're not coming up with brilliant, innovative ideas every 5 minutes, are we? We're not having these incredible eureka moments. It's churning, it's garbage, it's labeling stuff. I like that, I don't like that. Have you done that? What? You should need to be worrying about this, Steve. You haven't got everything together. What about that next week? And oh God, you made a mistake on that. Why do you do that? You're such an idiot. It's just kind of non-stop yak. And I'm sure we'll get into it later, but the most beautiful moments in our lives are actually when that noise ceases.
So I want to bring you back, because I just want to understand, like, how did you get to mindfulness? How did you piece that together? right?
I
How
went off
did you
on one, didn't
figure
I?
out, like, here I am, like, I'm not on a winning streak, right? I'm not feeling
Yeah.
it. And how did you go from that to really resorting to mindfulness?
Yeah, thank you for bringing it up. I get excited about this and I go off for all
No,
sorts of digressions. So thanks for reeling me back in.
absolutely.
So yeah, so I'm at IBM and I'm burned out pretty much, right? And I was looking for something, Lauren. I knew I needed something to. I was desperate to feel that peace. You know that peace when you're a kid, and you know your biggest problem is what time you have to stop playing outside and come in, or you know you can just go and lie in a field and look up at the sky, and the weight of the world's not on you. And I yearned for that. I was kind of existing rather than living at this point. But I didn't really know what. I didn't know what was going to help me. I kind of didn't want medication. I didn't really want that. But I had no way of fixing myself. I was very, and somebody at IBM said to me, why don't you try mindfulness? I've read some science about it. It looks incredible. And I told them in some pretty industrial language where they could put their mindfulness books and their apps and everything else related to mindfulness. It
Like,
sounded like
I want to hear the
BS.
real thing. What did you tell them?
Um,
Shove
we
it up
allowed
your
to,
butt?
you were allowed to swear on here, we?
Yes, of
I
course.
said I'm not fucking doing that. That's bullshit. Come on, man. That's just such bollocks. It just sounded like, you know, a meditator to me, it's very hard to shift these ingrained thoughts because even now, a meditator to me sounds boring. It sounds like not me. It sounds like not people I want to be around. It sounds like people who are checking out and just kind of go off in this artificial, airy, fairy space where everything's kind of good and they're all hugging each other and hugging trees. So it had no place in my life. I'm at IBM. I've got to get shit done. And I've got clients that need stuff to be done. And I can't just be over there like, oh, because, you know, that's not going to fix the project. That's not going to get everything done. Right. So
Right.
but here's what was funny about it. I had loads of different thoughts in my head, totally contradictory, right? Totally contradictory. This thing in my head called my mind, that this brain that comes up with these thoughts, who knows where they come from? But it's so interesting when you start to observe your mind. Even back then, I started to observe it, and I thought, on one side, I had my brain saying, "It doesn't work. It's bullshit. It's navel gazing. It's a load of crap. It's not for you. You're a tough guy. You're meant to, you know, deal with it properly." On the other hand, I also had a load of other thoughts that were also saying, maybe it does work, but here's the danger. If you get too good at this stuff, you're just going to end up this passive, meditative blob, right? And they'll say, well, don't give Steve any work anymore because he doesn't do anything now. He just sits there zenning out. So isn't that interesting? The same brain's telling me, don't do it because it doesn't work. Don't do it because it does work. And it's going to make you lose your job. And so
that mind tug of war, that's a painful place to be, because what you described was almost a level of desperation, which sometimes I think is a good place to be, because when you're that far down, I've been there myself, the willingness factor increases, right? You get to the place where you're like, oh my God, I just got to do something.
Absolutely. Motivated like nothing.
Totally. Rock bottom is a beautiful ride up.
Yeah. So there was probably 1% of my brain, Lauren, that thought, maybe there's something in this. Maybe it's been around for 2,500 years for a reason. Maybe the science was starting to get good then. I'm talking probably 13 years ago. The science was kind of in its infancy, but it was getting a lot stronger. Great people in the US, John Kabat-Zinn, you know, had done incredible things in the medical world and beyond. Google were just kind of starting to pick this up a little bit later, actually, maybe 2008. But there was enough science to convince my very skeptical brain at that point to at least take a look at it, right? So I didn't tell anyone. So to close this long story, I thought, right, I'm going to do it. But here's the deal. I'm going to do it in secret because I'm too tough. I'm too macho. I'm not going to burst into the bars in Portsmouth and go, hey, guys, who fancies, you know, let's join a meditation club. Let's all do this meditation. So I thought, I'm going to try it in secret. I'm not going to tell anybody. Didn't tell my close friends. Certainly didn't tell my colleagues. Hell no. But I downloaded an app called Headspace. Most people have probably heard of Headspace. Yeah, it's one of many nice apps. And I just did it for 10 days. And here's the thing. the end of that story isn't my life's been unicorns and rainbows ever since, Lauren. And I did 10 minutes a day. All my problems vanished in a beautiful puff of smoke, and I never got stressed ever again. But what did happen is there were tiny, tiny noticeable moments if I looked really closely. I was a little bit less anxious. I was a little bit less reactive. I was a little bit less angry. And I thought, holy shit, if this is real, if I'm not kidding myself here, hairs on the back of my neck stood up, still stand up when I talk about it, because I thought I just found the gym for my mind. We all know the gym and exercise is great for our bodies, right? Mate, did I just find the equivalent for my mind? Jesus, I need to explore this. So still didn't tell anybody, but I started devouring everything. I started looking up the greatest teachers. I started looking up what Google were doing. A guy called Chad Mentang, and they were bringing people like Eckhart Tolle and John Kabat-Zinn in to talk in there. I was thinking, is this got a place in business? But before I even thought that, I was thinking, I need to help me. I just want to help me. Screw everybody else. I need to help. So I started devouring all this stuff. And then it got interesting because quite a few people at work started saying to me after a month or so, what are you doing? You're doing something different. You're calmer. You just
really.
seem,
So
yeah,
somebody
they
on
noticed.
the outside actually experienced that difference.
Yeah, they noticed.
Experienced you in a different way.
Yeah, which was huge.
Huge.
That is huge. So I said, I told them what I was doing. I said, I'm doing this whole mindfulness meditation thing. And they begged me to teach them. They said, we're as stressed as you are. We're as sleep deprived as you are. We're as anxious as you are. Please, will you teach us? And
so this is the perfect segue, because here we have more executives who are dealing with a soft marketplace. Their anxiety, I'm not going to say they're burnt out. I don't even know where they are in this spectrum, but I know that their anxiety is already at a base level of height, because they're on the market, right? And going through that can be really vulnerable, frightening, exposing on so many levels. Yeah. And I'm going to say they're mostly stressed. Nobody's like sitting back on, this is the best time I've ever had. And so what I want to understand is for that audience, right? Where can mindfulness be a point of entry, and what can happen in that process as a result of even a short meditation, something? Because I know that this is not the first thing on everybody's mind, right? This is not like, oh, let me wake up and meditate and then I'll perform better and I'll be a better networker.
No, no one's thinking that. No business is thinking that. No business really wants meditation. Everybody wants the outcomes of meditation.
Right.
Right? The sleeping better, the lower anxiety, the lower blood pressure, the feeling better, the higher performance, the happiness, everything that comes with it. We all want that. It's a no-brainer, right? It's a rhetorical question. You wouldn't ask anyone, do you want those things? Of course you want those things. We just don't want to do the meditation part, the mindfulness part. So I have to find some way of making that so engaging, so secular, so mainstream, so normal that people try it for long enough and then go, Jesus Christ, it works. And now I'm motivated. Now I will do it. Now I will practice it because I can feel it. I don't believe it. I hate it when people say believe in mindfulness. Not about believing.
What's the hook? I want to know.
Experience it.
How do you do it?
So to finish the story, so they said to me, they begged me, can you teach us? And I said no at that moment, because I realized I knew enough about mindfulness even back then. You don't do this on the back of a cigarette packet, right? You don't just study this for a couple of weeks and then start teaching people. There was a depth to it that I appreciated very quickly. But it planted a seed in my head. And I remember coming home from work one day and just opening the laptop and typing in, where's the best place to learn how to teach mindfulness in business, in the workplace, in England? I thought I'll go anywhere in England to learn this. University of Oxford came up, obviously a very well-established, brilliant university. And I would take days off IBM. I would catch the train from where I live in Portsmouth, and it's about 2.5 hours. I'd go up to Oxford and I would sit and I would learn from some of the greatest meditation teachers. And I had such huge imposter syndrome there, Lauren. I mean, I'm there in these incredible if people have seen some of the Harry Potter films, they filmed some of that in Oxford's an incredible, beautiful city. The university buildings are amazing. And the people that teach there, and it's very, for someone like me, I'm just a little guy at IBM. So I had huge imposter syndrome. I was kind of there looking around thinking, what am I even doing here? I've read your book and you've written 50 white papers and like you're a well-renowned this, and then there's me sitting in there. But they took me under their wing pretty quickly, because what I was trying to do was relatively new then. It was can we bring this thing that had been very well established in the health sector? So our National Health Service were using mindfulness, the work John Kabat-Zinn's done in the US, and they were using it. So it's very strong academically and very strong clinically. Could we pick it up and put it in business? Big test, because people in business, they're not going to buy into it. For two main
No, that's the name of this episode, right?
Yeah.
It's BS.
Yeah,
and that thinking is the go-to. Right? We think the way you thought when you started. I'm a tough guy. I can handle this. I can, this is like airy fairy crap, right?
Yeah. So I guess one of the ways I overcome that is, and we could do it right now, actually. I would say to people, so one thing I dislike the word meditation. I dislike the word mindfulness. I know it's the translation that's stuck. But the reason I dislike those words is because they conjure up, for most people. Most people have an opinion on what both those things are, and like I did, it was a very ill-informed, uneducated opinion, but it was quite a strong opinion, right? So I say, let's forget all this. Let's forget the clever words. Let's forget the science. Let's forget all that stuff. I would say to people, anybody listening to this, I would say, let's bring it down to the most simple level, right? Think of one moment in your life. Anybody listening to this. One moment in your life where you either felt deeply peaceful. So just for a second, sometimes you have those moments where just for a second, it's like, oh, wow. And you kind of say wow after it because you feel it. The weight of the world lifts from your shoulders. Everything's okay for half a second. And then maybe half a second later, the brain comes in and goes, hang on, you need to be worrying. I know you had half a second off there, but you need to be worrying about your job. You need to be worrying about your finances. You need to be worrying about your health. You need to be worrying about your parents. You need to be worrying about your dog. And it comes back in, right? So life zooms back in. But if everybody listening to this thinks of one moment, so either when you felt deeply peaceful, maybe you were still, maybe you felt intensely alive and peaceful at the same time, but maybe you were very active. If you're doing a sport, maybe you were racing a car or a bike or skiing or climbing a mountain or rock or whatever. Or maybe it's a time where you really noticed beauty in something. Maybe you noticed a beautiful sunrise, sunset. Maybe you got a dog and your dog comes over and you meet eyes and her tail wags. And for a couple of seconds, you feel, how beautiful is that? So if everybody's got one or more examples of this, the thing to do is to zoom all the way in really closely to that very probably short period of time where you really felt that peace, where you really noticed that beauty, where you really felt that intense aliveness, that joy. And the only question that you need to ask yourself is, during that tiny moment in my life, how much thinking was I doing? And the answer for most people is none. And that's a radical realization. It doesn't sound like anything, but this is a radical thing to understand. Why? Because what we're saying here is that the best moments of our lives probably coincide with a gap in the otherwise incessant stream of thinking. So when the thinking mind shuts the hell up for a second, that's when we feel peaceful. When the thinking mind is quiet for just a brief time, that's when we feel joy. That's when we laugh. That's when we really notice beauty. That's when we feel connected. That's when we feel at ease. So now we got a question to ask, Lauren. So if that's a true statement for everybody listening, hopefully it is. And if it isn't, message me and we'll talk about it. So then we go to, okay, well, that sounds pretty easy, doesn't it? I just need to quiet my mind more and life's going to be amazing. So I just need to stop myself thinking, right? If it's the thinking mind that's causing most of my problems in my life, then I just need to learn I just need to stop that. And most people assume that they can just stop their minds, or just knowing the fact that they need to stop their mind is enough. And of course, we can't do that. So I'd say to most people, and we can do it now. Let's do it maybe just for 10 seconds, because a lot of silence probably isn't going to be great on a podcast. But I'd say to people now, I want everybody listening here, I want you to stop your mind thinking completely. You're not allowed one thought, okay? You're not allowed one thought about anything we've said. You're not allowed to think about what you're going to do tonight, what you did earlier, how good bad your weekend was, where you're going on vacation next. I don't even want you to think, this must be 10 seconds by now. Come on. And I don't want you to think, do you know what? I'm not thinking, because that's another thought as well. So, not allowed to hold your breath. That's the only rules, right? So let's just do it. Let's just play with a bit of fun. Stop thinking now. So that was 10 seconds. Now, if we'd gone 20 seconds, probably most people, if they've never done anything like this before, most people will be having one or many thoughts. The mind will just kind of come in. And so what does that tell us? That tells us the second big thing you can take from this podcast, right? The first thing is to notice how most of the beautiful moments in your life, when your mind is still, how incredible is that? Number two, notice that unfortunately we can't stop our minds by trying hard to stop our minds. It'd be like me saying to you, so you rang me up, Lauren, and said, "Oh, Steve, I'm having terrible trouble sleeping. It's 3 a.m. here. I still can't sleep." And I said, "Lauren, just try harder. Come on. Put some effort in here."
If I was able to do it, I wouldn't be calling you, right?
Right. Exactly. Everyone's thought of that, right? So the mind is an incredibly skillful opponent if you challenge it and if you take it on. So nothing around mindfulness is ever about beating your mind into submission, about suppressing thought, about resisting thoughts. It's about working with, not against. But point two to take from this podcast, when you try and still your mind by bullying it into submission, it fights you back pretty hard. And is that one winner?
I like what you said about it being a fierce opponent. And one of the other things that I heard you say in some of the other podcasts that I listened to is how much courage it takes to be alone with those thoughts. So I want to talk about that, because in the earlier part of this podcast, you talked about how active, how loud our head is. Then it got louder with the internet. Then it got louder with gosh only knows what. And so now to be able to sit and be alone with your thoughts, whether it's, in the exercise that we just did, why do people fight that courage when they want the outcome so badly?
I think because the mind is probably the most brilliant, I was going to say torture instrument on this planet. Like your mind can beat you up like nobody else. Your mind can take you to some pretty horrible places if it wants to, and scare the hell out of you and make you very low and very anxious or very happy or very peaceful. And so the thoughts that we have, we take them personally. We identify with them. We think they're us. That's a fundamental mistake. This is what we learn when we practice this stuff, right? Every thought you've ever had has come and gone up to this point. True? Every emotion you've ever had in your life has come and gone up to this point. So you cannot be those things. There must be something that's able to witness that. If it's something transient that comes and goes, then there must be a witnessing presence, if you like, an observer that can see that. Now, often that observer isn't tangible to us. We're kind of lost in the thought. We're gripped in the strong emotion. There's no separation between us and the emotion, us and the thought. But when we create this gap, which is what you can create when you practice this stuff, there's liberation in there. Wow. Because that's like the difference between standing out in a storm and getting very, very wet and sitting in the house watching a storm. That tiny bit of perspective is everything, right? The storm's still happening. I'm in the house watching it now. Okay, there it goes. Rather than just out there in it, I can't hear or see anything else. I'm just completely consumed by it.
This is beautiful. And the way that you bring it to life. And I know, at this point, about how many people have you been teaching throughout your years at IBM? This body of work and knowledge is tremendous. But what I really, really like about you and the way that you approach it is that you insist on having fun with it. Otherwise, you're barred from any of your future courses. Isn't that true?
Yeah, you've got to. One of the biggest compliments people I've heard over the years, the first answer to your first question is thousands. I mean, I was teaching 1,000 people at IBM. I started something called the Mindfulness Summit at IBM. I think back in 2016, 2017, maybe.
You did a couple of them, right?
Yeah, I did a few. Yeah, I just had this idea. There were pockets of us all around the globe that were practicing mindfulness. I thought, let's bring everybody together. Let's get some external speakers in. And we had some great turnouts. I mean, we'd get 1,000 people kind of a day live at those sessions. So even when I was at IBM, I was kind of reaching thousands of people, which was a really beautiful thing. And obviously since IBM, I've had the real pleasure of working with loads of other companies and loads of other industries, and leaders as well. Maybe we'll talk about that in future time. But that was the first question you asked me, wasn't it? It was how many people?
How many people, and how do you make it fun?
How
do you make this so that it doesn't feel like what you described, right? Like I gotta keep my brain into submission, and I've got to sit still. And I can't
great
scratch
question.
my head.
Yeah,
like that. That's, I think, a big resistor, right?
Yeah,
it's going to be boring.
Right. So first thing is to have no elephant in the room ever. If you think mindfulness is boring, tell me. If you think mindfulness is bullshit, tell me. If you're in week 2 of the course, you still think it's bullshit, tell me. Brilliant. Let's talk about it. I'm very open to it. And one thing is to just realize that we can't expect mindfulness to suddenly jump up your list, your kind of to-do list, right? I think of people having a should list. Like, I should do this. I should get to the gym more. I should work less. I should get more sleep. I should eat healthier. I should. People can probably list 5 or 6 of them. Mindfulness isn't going to jump to number 1 just because you suddenly read a scientific paper that said this can be amazing, and you've read someone else's review that said it changed your life. It's just not. So let's meet that face on, and let's say, okay, so we're not going to expect it to do that. So can we find ways of introducing mindfulness into our lives, not by doing different things, but by doing things differently? Because then people can get on board with that. So if we go back to 10 minutes ago when I said, think of some of the most beautiful moments in your life. If somebody said, I don't know, whenever I go and play basketball, I always just feel calm. When I'm on the court, that's it. You know, the distractions go, I'm not really thinking. I'm just in the zone. I'm in the flow, is what they describe as an athlete, right? And they'd say, well, that's beautiful. And I'd say, okay, well, that's you're practicing mindfulness when you're playing basketball. Now, can we drop some more moments like that into your day? Can we interrupt your thinking mind and just invite it to be still when you're taking a shower, when you're drinking your coffee, when you're commuting to work, when you're putting the garbage out? It doesn't even need to be anything exciting. And when people realize that they can do that, and I show them ways of doing that, then it doesn't become this onerous chore. They've got to sit and do an hour of sitting still, and their mind just goes crazy and they feel like they're getting nowhere. But they start to interrupt their day. They start to drop some kind of mindfulness confetti throughout their day. And what they're doing is just leaving little moments of stillness. Okay, so when I'm in the shower, when I'm washing my hair, for 3 seconds, I smell the shampoo. I can feel the warm water. Oh, beautiful. 3 seconds of stillness, that's all. And then I get out and carry on thinking. When I'm walking up the stairs, can every now and then for 2 seconds, I actually feel my feet touching each step. Maybe I could feel the handrail, the cool or the warmth. When I'm outside walking the dog, can I feel the sun on my skin? Can I hear the crunch of the snow? Can I hear the birds singing? Can I have some of my attention or all of my attention in my senses? Because guess what? When your attention's in your senses, your thinking mind starts to quieten. So people start to learn that there are many ways, and some of them are doing it already. So we just try and piggyback that. For me, it's about finding what resonates with people. You know, if I found out you're a great dog lover, Lauren, we go down the whole, your dog's going to be your greatest mindfulness teacher. You know, if you're into sports, okay, well, how does sports and mindfulness relate? If you love making stuff, how, you know, why does that make you feel good? If you love cycling for 10 hours at the weekend because it's the only time you feel peaceful, let's explore why. And let's find ways of achieving the same state of peace and joy and aliveness that you do in those things when you're doing the things you've got to do anyway. When you're sat in the back of a taxi going somewhere, when you're taking your shower, when you're eating your food, when you're driving somewhere, when you're doing all this stuff, because that's when the magic happens, right? Because people don't have, especially the execs I work with, they have no time for this. No
Exactly.
time for this.
I like the way that you talked about piggybacking and mindfulness confetti. And so I want to offer folks a way of accessing you and your courses. And it's not just for executives. You work through this across huge organizations and change the way that they show up for work and reduce that burnout. So point us to where that is. And of course, we'll include that link to your courses and all of that.
Thank you. Yeah. So there's the most active place I am. I'm only on one social media place. It's very easy to find me. That's on LinkedIn.
Woo!
So I love LinkedIn. It's been a great place to kind of demonstrate what I do and to meet a lot of clients, which has been fantastic. The other thing I have is my website, which is just stevewaremindfulness.com. My courses really, they fall into a couple of categories, I'd say, Lauren. So one is, in fact, I kind of changed this up a bit recently. So we have a guy in the UK, you've probably not heard of it. I don't think he's made it to the US. So back in the lockdown, we had a guy called, what's his name? Joe Wicks. He's a personal trainer. He's a famous, he's kind of celebrity fitness guy in the UK. And he had the idea, everybody's locked in their houses, it's COVID. And he thought, wouldn't it be a good idea to get people active just 15 minutes a day? So he created this thing called Wake Up with Joe. First thing in the morning, you get up in your front room. You don't need any gym equipment. You get up, you do your stretching, you find something to lift, a bag of flour, you do a little bit of weights, whatever. He'd do everything. He'd make it really fun. And people that didn't really want to work out, probably never worked out, joined him, had a blast, 15 minutes a day. Everyone can find 15 minutes. And he was really successful with that. And last year I thought, you know what? I just need to do the same thing, but for people's minds. So I started doing something called mindfulness sprints. And this is where we get together. And this is a brilliant way. It's such a great thing because it's either a great way of introducing mindfulness to a big organization at scale very cheaply, or it's a beautiful way of helping people to continue the momentum of their practice at various points in the year. They can join me for a 2-week sprint. And a sprint is always very easy. All you got to do is connect in. You can be anywhere in the world. You connect in for 15 minutes. We sit. We have a little bit of discussion, and then we do a short practice. At the end of that practice, I send you an email and I say, hey, Lauren, thanks for joining me today. A little bit of explanation as to why we did what we did, because people like that, maybe a tiny bit of science. And then I'll give you one thing to do in that day. One extra way that you can find a mini sliver of peace in your day that you may not have found it before. And we're back to it we're back to not doing anything different, about doing something differently.
Is there a prerequisite to do that? Or can you just start with the sprints?
You can start with the sprints. Some companies do start with sprints. I think it's a brilliant way of doing it because what you can do is allow people to kind of try before they buy.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's a beautiful way of discerning.
So we want to make sure that we include that as well, because I think that is, especially for people who are in transition, it may be a great way of them biting off enough to maybe get them hooked and also get them over some of the initial and continuous challenges that they're facing.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
it's a very light, it's a fairly low touch, but it's a very high impact thing. I get some really, really nice feedback from people in the sprints. I mean, there was one lady, a company I did it in last year, American company, and she wrote to me after, and I just sent out a survey. I always send out a survey saying, hey, hope you enjoyed the sprint. How can we improve this? How can we make this even better for you? Tell me what the perfect sprint would look like for you now you've been on one. And she wrote back to me and said, I totally loved it. And she said, it was so helpful. She said, I lost my only sibling recently. And she said, so I'm going through a really, really tough time. And she said, this was just a little sanctuary for me to come and find a moment of peace and stillness and a bit of kind of me time. And she said, it was so good that I rang my mum in California and got her to connect in and listen to it as well. And so this stuff really ripples out. Like a common misconception around mindfulness is that it's kind of a fairly selfish, self-centered thing. That's this solo activity that you lock yourself away in a quiet room and go and do. Right. The ripples of this are huge. And that was such a touching testimonial to get from her. You know, she said that her mom was had found some peace too. And I thought, like, that's the greatest feedback I'll ever get. Can you imagine helping someone who's grieving the loss, of sudden loss, unexpected loss of someone? To have even imagined that I could help them find a tiny moment of peace in their day when they wouldn't have thought they got it that's what gets me out of bed to do this stuff.
So what I want to do is wrap this up with our 3 signature questions. And since we're talking mindfulness, I would love to know what your recommended post-it would be if we were to practice, as you have also described, a way of bringing it in a non-invasive or like isolating way. Is there a post-it that you would recommend we put on our desktop or something nearby to just get closer to it?
By a post-it, you mean like literally a post-it note?
Yes, a post-it note.
What, with something on there that would prompt you to...
like a reminder, yeah.
So I actually asked people to use these. And do you know what I'd say? It sounds like a cop-out to your question. I don't think you actually need anything written on it. All you need is that trigger in your head. And here's why, Lauren. Let me explain it. So
I love that.
So for most,
it's not a reminder, but it's a reminder.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. So for most people, the hard part about this is they forget to practice. Like they think, oh, okay, well, when I'm drinking my next coffee, I'll smell it. I'll smell the peppermint leaves of that beautiful peppermint tea. I'll taste it. I'll feel the warmth. I'll kind of just be with it. You know, anyone that loves drinking fine wine or fine whiskey is already a very mindful person. Although I don't necessarily condone mindfulness and alcohol, but so it's not so much actually doing this mini moment of mindfulness, remembering to do these mini moments of mindfulness. So what I say to people is, one thing you can do is take a little sticker. It doesn't need to be anything. It could be a little post-it, and put it somewhere. And then when you see that post-it, you go, how present am I right now? So don't put it on your monitor. Don't put it somewhere you're going to see it 8 hours a day. Put it on your bathroom mirror when you walk in there. What's that there for? Why is there a little sticker in the bottom corner of that?
I'm doing this. Yeah. I am so doing this.
Why is it on the place where I make my tea? Where is it?
Yes. Awesome. The second question is, since you are a mindfulness meditation, I know there's no other word that I know of to replace that right now, scholar, what is your favorite book or go-to? Is there something that you think, oh my gosh, this is like the thing for you that you would recommend that we read or indulge in?
Yeah, so this depends on where you are in your journey, I would say. If you're a complete beginner, my go-to book would be one from University of Oxford. It's called Finding Peace in a Frantic World. Mindfulness, Finding Peace in a Frantic World. Very secular, very easy to read, very easy to follow. Super, super good for beginners. If you've been meditating a while and you really want something deeply wise to really get into, and something that's going to really knock your socks off, and a totally timeless classic you can be able to read again and again and again, anything by the most incredible mindfulness teacher in the world, in my opinion, who's a guy called Eckhart Tolle. So he's written The Power of Now, he's written A New Earth, he's written Stillness Speaks, he's written Guardians of Being. Probably The Power of Now and A New Earth are the two big ones. But I wouldn't recommend those necessarily to beginners. I remember when I was starting out, I read it and I missed 99% of what he's saying.
Yeah, I missed it too.
Did you? Yeah.
So I'll go back to recommendation 1. And then the last question, I'm so curious about this, is what's your walk-up song? What's the song that like gets you feeling it?
I'd probably say I really like Three Little Birds.
I don't know it.
Yeah, you do. It's a Bob Marley one.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah, don't worry about a thing.
All right. That's perfect.
Gonna be all right. That's kind of I think I lost peace for so long in my life. I worried so hard for so long in my life that any antithesis to that, anything that's peace-inducing, anything that says, hey, it's all right, you don't need to worry, you really don't need to hold on to all this stuff, I really gravitate towards that. So I love that song. Whenever I hear it, kind of makes me smile because it feels like I can exhale when I hear it.
Steve Ware, I cannot thank you enough. You're like a quiet hero to me, and
Thank you.
I especially appreciate some of your videos, and they always make me smile. And you make it fun and approachable, and most importantly, I just love your why. I love why you're doing this, and I love the message that you're sending. So please go
Thank you.
find Steve on LinkedIn, and I am going to be taking some of your courses. So I'll be the first to say what happens, because I'm not necessarily a skeptic. I just make excuses saying I'm too busy. So
Yeah.
here you go. I'm gonna test it out, and we will see you next week. Thank you so much for joining, dear listeners. And you know how this goes. If you love this episode, please write us an Apple review. Why? Because we're growing this thing and we need you. We need your love. We need your support. And we also want to continue to grow this to help more people get rid of that stinky old career advice that says it has to suck. So tune in next week and we'll bring you another wonderful guest. Until then, thanks so much.
Thank you for joining today. We appreciate your listening ears. Big time. We ask this: use these tools, not tomorrow, right now, and share them by spreading the love, leaving us a rating and subscribe so you don't miss the next career blast in a half. Most of all, thank you for you.